So thank you all for joining us. Today we're joined by Alex Sobel, who is the MP for Leeds Central and Headingley North and chair of the largest APPG for Fair Votes. We're also joined by Alex Zur-Clark, who works for Labour for a New Democracy and has been doing a lot of parliamentary work alongside Alberto Smith from Make Votes Matter. Alberto's not on the call today, but Alex is joining as well. So just a couple of housekeeping issues before we kick off. Do make sure you stay on mute, please. And just a reminder of our guiding principles that we're all here because we want to change the voting system. And we come from different parts of the country, have different backgrounds and different political persuasions. So we do encourage chat, but we ask that you keep it friendly. Thank you very much. I've already mentioned it's being recorded, but I'll repeat that again for anybody who's joined a bit later. Please do put any questions in the chat throughout the session. There will be time for a Q&A and we are logging all the questions, so we'll be able to pull those up for you. We're going to be speaking to Alex about the APPG, which is All Party Parliamentary Group's approach to the representation of the people bill. We're going to be discussing the next stages of the bill, and we're going to be asking Alex's advice on how we can get it off to how we can give the APPG the best possible chance for success in bringing PR into the bill. I also, before we start, I want to say a huge thank you to everybody on the call. We've got a few really impressive figures to share. I mean, I would say we've got like the best activists in any political campaign, and I mean it's genuinely true. You know, like proportional representation campaigners, you're in another league. But we've had 20,000 people who have written to their MP to brief them and secure their attendance at the second reading of the bill, or ask them to secure their attendance at the second reading of the bill. More than 20,000 people have also signed our latest petition to Keir Starmer. We'll pop some links in the chat as well for anyone who hasn't got to it yet. We've secured local and national press coverage about PR. And we're going to be we're also going to be holding another call on securing local press in May after the local elections. So keep an eye out for email invitations. Again, we'll put some links in the chat for useful information. But also nearly every MP up and down the country has heard from their constituents about how much PR matters ahead of the bill's second reading. And that's so important. And so, again, just a huge thank you to all of you for all you do. So without further ado, I am going to hand over to Alex Sobel to talk a little bit about the APPG.
Thanks, Caroline. I just want to start by saying it's great to see so many people that I know, people that have campaigned for a change in the voting system in Westminster for far longer than I have, a number of former MPs, in particular Sandy Martin, who's the chair of Labour Campaign for Electoral Reform, who do such sterling work in this area. I've always been told by MPs from other parties that we'll only win PR if the Labour leadership support PR, and then we have the opportunity to do that from government. So now is our time. It's also historically very much the Labour's party's time. We've moved from a position where it's fair to say, probably when I joined the Labour Party, the majority support was first past the post in the wake of the 97 general election. And since then, the dial has been moving, and it'll keep moving for support for PR. 2022 and 2023, we won support at Labour conference, including the vast majority of the trade union bloc. And as Caroline said, the All Party Parliamentary Group is the largest group in Parliament. Alex will have the latest figure, but it's about 160 MPs. But just over half, in fact, are Labour MPs. And that's a really crucial thing. And what you need to remember is that APPGs are only for backbench MPs. That's 100 Labour MPs who cannot join the APPG. And we know we have significant support in the government, including from the Chief Whip, who's a long and historical supporter of change the voting system. We've undoubtedly created a bridgehead, and we have won some gains in this parliament. So, for instance, the Conservatives took away the secondary vote in the mayoral elections. It has been put back. We had the announcement of the Independent Electoral Commission, which is really important going forward. The Representation of the People Bill, although has no measures for PR, has got, I would say, foundational issues. For instance, from my point of view, and people are quite happy to come back and argue with this, that it's a necessary precondition of PR that we have automatic voter registration, because it's only then that we'll have a real feel for the nationally for how many electors there actually are, rather than the current system that we have, which is fragmented, to say the least. Particularly, I was out. Look, I'll just be honest. I'll give an anecdote today. I was out door knocking today in Headingley, and not a single student's door who I knocked on was the name on the electoral register, which is very frustrating. And that's because of the system that we now have. And we actually had a system before the Conservatives changed it, where it would allow universities to register students en bloc. So, those sort of things are necessary work, staging work for changing the commission. So there are things in this bill, which obviously also includes votes 16 and 17-year-olds. The other aspect that the APPG works on, which may be of or slightly less interest to some here, is the work around misinformation, dark money, and politics. We had the Rycroft review, which I had a very long meeting with Philip Rycroft, really useful meeting, and a number of things that we put forward were in the recommendations, and the government have already acted on two of those things, one of which, and I just want to say this sort of, I don't know how Chatham Housey we are, but I more or less did say this in Parliament, one of which the minister told me would not be in the bill, and it wasn't in the bill, obviously, when it was published, but is now being introduced by Steve Reed, and that's donation caps. At the moment, that's just donation caps for UK citizens based overseas, but it gives us a bridgehead on donation caps. So I think in the current system, when we've seen a £9 million donation to reform from Christopher Harborne, is absolutely necessary. And that obviously is because he's based in Thailand. There's no reason why somebody based here can't give a huge donation to reform. And that's exactly the sort of thing which skews our entire political system. I won't talk about a number of the things we need to do in the social media space. We haven't got time for that. But again, the bill tackles some of that, but not all of it. And we need to work with the government to make the bill much stronger. We had a really compelling session. The APG had a really compelling session with John Curtis, where he showed the reality of the of how first past the post is going to create a hugely skewed result on current polling. It was terrifying, to be quite frank. And then we even had a Conservative MP in the room who was also terrified. So you never know, we might get our first Conservative MP won over to PR. But we actually had a letter signed by 50 leading academics. And I can tell you we got more. And the reason we could have got more is because some academics are holding back because they're confident we will get the commission, and some of them want to be chairing the commission. So obviously they sign the letter, then they're partial, and the government can't consider them for chairing the commission. So we probably could have got far more than we did. And quite rightly, because we do need somebody to chair the commission, held back. So before, I don't know, I've probably used up a fair amount of my time. You want to do questions? The commission is the mechanism through which the APPG thinks that we will progress to changing the system. And the commission will be an independent commission from government, which will be experts plus an element of a People's Assembly, Citizen Assembly type model. And it will then bring forward recommendations, which the government, and obviously the time is moving on, but what we would hope is the government implements it and then we vote utilising that system in the next general election, because that's the safest way. But failing that whatever it recommends goes in the manifestos of, at the very least, the Labour, the Lib Dem and the Green parties. And then let's see what happens in the election, but that should give us a fair chance of getting it implemented unless something goes terribly wrong, which we hope it won't, I'm sure. So that's the approach. And I'm sure people have a question about mechanism and about legitimacy and all sorts of things, which I'll probably take in the questions rather than now. Somebody will probably also ask me about systems. There's no predetermination here. That's the point of the commission. Firstly, to decide whether what Labour put in his manifesto that first past the post is broken, or whether it is the best system for UK general elections. We would have done something badly wrong if we managed to get people on a commission and then that's their conclusion, and then we can probably all go home and pack up, to be honest. But we're fairly confident that they won't, that they'll say that that's their conclusion, and then they'll recommend a system. So I can give you my opinion, but that's the approach that we're taking. It's also to give it legitimacy and also not to look like it's like somebody's favourite hobby horse is getting its way. And I'm sure lots of people have lots of history. We've had lots of really interesting emails about the history of this and systems put forward, and we can have that conversation. I'm sure I love those conversations, but this is the approach that we're taking. And just to say, we are going to put this forward, and we are gathering support within Parliament for this at the moment. And also, just finally, on the Labour sort of party point of view, and I see there's lots and lots of Labour Party members here, that this is not a partisan issue. The spread of view within the PLP who support the Commission and change system goes from Luke Akers to me to Richard Bergen. I can assure you that is the entire width of politics of the Labour Party. If you're outside of that, then you're probably not in the Labour Party anymore.
Thanks so much, Alex. What I'm gonna do, there's loads of really good questions coming in. Sorry, Alex, you had finished, hadn't you?
Yep.
Oh, sorry, I suddenly thought maybe I've got a lag on my system. We've got lots of really great questions coming in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hear from Alex Clark from Labour for a New Democracy first, and then take all the questions together, if that's okay, because then we can sort of divvy them up as to who's best to answer them. So, Alex, can I hand over to Alex Clark to avoid confusion? Can I hand over to you?
Well, thank you, Caroline, and nice to meet everyone here. I'm sure there'll be quite a lot of overlap, but for those who don't know us, I'm from Labour for a New Democracy, which is the grassroots Labour campaign for proportional representation. And it's the kind of organised campaign that over the last few years has seen a lot of the movement within Labour towards proportional representation that Alex was talking about. Since I joined the team back in 2023, our focus has really been on mobilising and organising Labour MPs, and particularly the new generation that we knew were coming in and had been part of the shift within the party. There's been a real kind of generational change within the Parliamentary Labour Party over the last few years, and there's huge support now, not just amongst backbenchers, but amongst government ministers as well. Early on in the Parliament, I'm sure many people will know there was that vote in favour of proportional representation during a 10-minute rule bill, and that was only because 59 Labour MPs came out and voted for it. Since then, we've been building the all-party parliamentary group, and Alex mentioned the numbers. So there's 156 members, and 88 of those are Labour, including 80 Labour MPs. We're kind of pushing at the moment, particularly on the representation of the People Bill, to make the case for a National Commission on Electoral Reform and keeping a close eye on what opportunities are coming up. We've got conference season later this year. The May elections will provide an opportunity for a conversation about the direction of the country, and whether or not first past the post is a viable prospect given the fragmentation and volatility that we've seen come to a head over the last couple of years, but it has been kind of 60 years in the making. It's becoming increasingly clear that this system isn't sustainable for Labour or for the country. So yeah, we're kind of optimistic about the progress that we can make, and I won't rehash any of the stuff that Alex has spoken about in terms of the opportunities and the support in the PLP, but happy to go through any questions.
Thanks so much, Alex. Right, I am going to start pulling some questions. So the first one we've got, sorry, is somebody off mute? Is it possible for, thank you. First one we've got is from Alan Meekings. I'm going to direct this one back to Alex Sobel. He is asking if anyone seriously believes that full PR can be implemented in advance of the next general election, which is a question we hear quite frequently, and we'd like to hear your thoughts on it, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, it's the window is closing, but it's technically possible. So we expect the commission to last a year, and then then generally bills last a year. So that means that, if the commission started, say, in the autumn of 2026, we could have it by autumn 2028. And nobody seriously expects us to have an election before May 2029. But you can see the timeline. If we get past sort of probably March, April 27, and we haven't launched a commission, then that probably the time is not there anymore to this parliament, unless the government's really desperate and to do it at that point, which, I don't know, they have to be. I think this May we'll start to see the political winds change on this. So I don't want to preempt it, but it is possible. It is. I'd say that it's the latter, that it goes in the manifestos, is more likely than it being implemented this Parliament. But you just need to look at the opinion polls to see why politically it might be expedient to do this Parliament.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. That's really helpful. And it is one of the questions we regularly get asked. And I think our local groups get asked it on street stalls as well quite frequently. So it's really helpful. I'm going to keep the questions sort of grouped together in similar themes. But Roseanne Bostock has asked a question about implementation, which is, she's saying, similar to the trial for weekend voting in this May's local elections, would it be a good idea to trial various forms of PR in local elections across the across the UK? Sorry, US on the brain. Across the UK, ASAP, in order to get PR in the public eye. I don't know what people think of that idea. I don't know which Alex would like to take this. Actually, is anybody itching?
I'll start, and then I'll take the hard ones, and I'll let Alex take the easy ones, because I think that's fair, as I'm elected and he's not. So, I mean, one, there are 3 parts of the United Kingdom that already have a lot of experience of voting in PR elections: Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. So there's no need to try anything outside of England. The problem, I think, with trialing PR in local elections is, and the way we keep councils on board actually is we tell them we're not going to change their voting system. So there's probably less reason to have it in council elections unless councils become effectively ungovernable, which we have got a little bit, and then they sort of play about with it by changing the system of the council or bringing in an elected mayor or something like that. I think it would be more difficult technically to do that than to do what we're suggesting, which is the commission then legislating for it.
Yeah, that's a really valid point. Thank you. We've also got another question that comes down to sort of elections and technicalities around elections and changes around elections, and that's from Mackenzie, who is Mackenzie is one of our volunteers from Manchester, who is 14 years old and really interested in getting involved in local politics, which is great, and really wants to see PR as a change. And Mackenzie has asked, how does Labour plan to work with young people to ensure their vote matters? And how does Labour do that when they consider implementing votes at 16? Are Labour going to be working with the Youth Parliament? And I think this is one, again, Alex Sobel, for you.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit of, obviously we work very closely with Parliament and the government, so it's rather than a party political thing, it's more like a government thing, I would say. The government and the Speaker, and with the Youth Select Committee, we just had the Youth Select Committee meet in Parliament, but also much more importantly with youth councils around the country. That unfortunately we've seen a huge, and I'm sure Mackenzie knows this, a huge drop in funding and support for youth work around the country. It's one of the National Youth Agency campaigns. That is something that the government is looking at reversing. We've got the pilot youth hubs. Leeds is one of the pilot areas. I'm very glad to say we're going to get one. But hopefully within a year to 18 months, we'll see a big reversal around that sort of youth work, that youth engagement. And part of that is that political engagement, civic engagement, right? Not party political, but civic engagement on civic politics. So that's where I hope we can do. I mean, there is no silver bullet though, and it isn't easy. But my personal view, I'm sure you agree with Mackenzie, and I've got my sons in year 10, so probably slightly older than, will be slightly older than you, is that young people actually are probably much better equipped to vote at 16 than some other parts of the demographic, depending on their background. And so I think that we already have a level of engagement and education that I certainly didn't receive at school, from Buckinghamshire County Council in the 1990s. So I think that in some ways young people are better equipped than they've ever been.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I'm going to throw one in Alex Zur-Clark's direction, balance it out a little bit. We've got a question from David Glennie, who asks for clarification on how many Labour MPs support PR, which I think is your difficult question for the evening, Alex, to put you on the spot.
It's one I've heard before, I won't lie. A great many is probably the most diplomatic answer I can give here. So I mentioned that vote back in December 2024, which went in our favour. That showed of the Labour MPs that voted in favour, that showed a clear majority are supportive of PR, and I think that can be taken as indicative. There is a kind of small but vocal private group that are against this and always have been, but as I mentioned, there's a generational shift that's occurred where the only kind of common factor that we can see when we look at who tends to support and oppose this, it is not regional, it's not based on whether or not their seat is safe, it's which decade did they enter in Parliament. And there's a huge number of Labour MPs that are from that 2024 intake. And the vast majority of them are on side on this. So the kind of cultural sympathy within Labour is to support this now. It's more a matter of whether or not the government are going to take the lead and kind of see the writing on the wall for this system. One of the other things that the APPG pointed out early on in this Parliament was that the vast majority of the Commons has parties in it that agree that first past the post is broken, be it the Greens and Lib Dems with explicitly pro-PR policy, or Labour's own policy, which recognises that the voting system is flawed. So, yeah, there's pretty widespread support in the PLP.
Thanks, Alex. That's great. We have had loads of questions about systems, too many to read them out individually. So I'm gonna lump them all together. There's lots of questions on different systems, party list, ranked choice voting. I mean, we could do a whole other event on systems, and I think these things will happen in the future. But this evening, we're not going to delve hugely into pulling systems apart because I think we'd be here until next week if we tried to. But what I will do, Alex Sobel, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you if you have a favourite system. I mean, this is real electoral nerdery, isn't it? What's your favourite voting system? But do you have a preference?
I do. I do have a preference for something like the Irish system, where we have effectively, super constituency elected by STV. So that's my preference. I think it's like, I'll explain a little bit what I think it's important when we're changing and we've got such an ingrained system, although there is majority support for PR, that people still can point and say that person is my MP. So one of the arguments used against is like the Israeli system, which which was designed for a tiny country, and the country's grown. And even internally, if you talk to anybody who's a progressive in Israel, which once you get through everything else to their voting system, they're all like, no, we've got a crackers voting system. So I still think that people need to recognise the geography of the constituency as like they're broadly where they live. And that's easier in urban areas than rural areas. So maybe you'd have larger and more MPs elected, although the population elected would be the same per MP in an urban area than a rural area. And then I think it's important that we don't have lists for my political reasons. What I don't want is for the party centrally to choose. I remember this is the way that we operated in the European Parliament. And I also don't like Dahont. And that wasn't very good for outspoken members of Parliament. As an outspoken member of Parliament, I'd rather not do that. But so we'd have like now, we'd have individual candidates. People would vote for individual candidates, utilising transferable vote, and that is how the system will work, and then people can say that's my MP. And it's a good argument to say that now. So the example I always use now is that the people of South Norfolk or Norfolk South, where Terry Jermy's the MP and Liz Truss used to be the MP, 26% of people that turned out voted for him. 26%. So that means 74% didn't vote for him. And so 74% have quite rightly said this MP is not like legitimate. It's not the person I vote for. If we have super constituents who say 3, 5 MPs, whatever it is, can say, I voted for that one. That's my MP. And then everybody, or not everybody, because there'll still be people who well, there will be everybody because they voted on, as long as they voted transferably, as long as they use some of their preferences, will be able to say, I voted for at least one person who's representing me. And I think that's the important thing. If people utilise, say, 5 votes, 5 preferences, I think it's important to ensure that person is represented by one of their 5 preferences at least. So, because I think tactical votings kill politics as well. The negative campaigning, what we saw in Gorton and Denton, for instance, from my own party, and in many other, particularly in by-elections, but also in general elections, the so-called tactical squeeze has killed the hope in people of politics. So I think that systems is quite important to me. Obviously, it's up to the commission, and whatever the commission decide, I will support wholeheartedly.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Alex. I will stress at this point that Make Votes Matter doesn't have we don't have a system that we support. We do have the Good Systems Agreement, which is always worth checking out, which gives a kind of baseline as to what would be considered a good system and what wouldn't. But we do believe that every proportional representation system is better than first past the post, and we support a national commission. So just to be really clear on that. Alex Clark, did you have an opinion on systems? Did you want to chip in, or are you quite happy to move on to the next question?
I won't take us down that rabbit hole. I do.
As I say, we'd be here till next Christmas, I think. We've got a question from Lewis Colwell, who has asked how much support is organised in the House of Lords, and if an amendment is passed on the Representation of the People Bill, will there be any resistance in the Lords? This is probably one for Alex Clark, actually. I know you've been doing some work in the House of Lords, so hand that one to you, please.
Yeah, and I should say I work really closely with Alberto in Make Votes Matters team on the kind of cross-party organisation of this stuff. I mostly focus on the Labour side of things. So within the Labour cohort in the Lords, there are some pretty great supporters of this. You've got long-standing supporters like Roger Liddell and Ruth Lister and Margaret Hodge, and kind of Alf Dubbs and people who, and Neil Kinnock. So there's high profile supporters in there. As I say, I think there's a bit of a generational thing that's happened. So I wouldn't say the Lords is a natural base of support for democratic reform. But yeah, there are prominent supporters and they're engaged. They're members of the All Party Group, and we'll be working with them over the coming months.
Brilliant, thank you. I've got Tim Hagyard has asked a question. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Apologies if I'm not, Tim. He has asked, could the APPG support running a parallel citizens assembly to advise on the bill generally and PR specifically? Is that something that's possible? And that one I think is probably best put to Alex Sobel again. Giving you all the good questions this evening.
Yeah, I mean that's a complex question. So on the Roper bill, I just don't think we'd have time, to be honest, unless we did it for the Lords. There certainly wouldn't be enough time in the Commons. The committee will finish just before maybe. Well, I'm not even sure it'll finish before we prorogue. It might do, but it might not. And then we'll have sort of report stage and third reading, I imagine. Will be one of the first things that happens after the King's speech. I can't imagine that we'll still be in the Commons by the middle of June. To be honest, I think we'll have gone to the Lords by then. So even attempting to set up a People's Assembly in that timescale is impossible. Never mind have one. So I think with this bill, I just don't think, and also it costs quite a lot of money, and we haven't got the money, like in anywhere near any way, shape, or form. But if we get to a certain point, and the government hasn't agreed, then that is something we consider if we could fund it. But I think that all our efforts are on getting the government to run it, to getting the government to run the whole process rather than a third party.
Thank you. Um, we've got quite a few questions about Starmer and whether Starmer could be convinced to change his mind, um, where Starmer is on PR. Has he always been there on PR? Is he, has he been in different places previously? But there's also a few of the questions sort of lean towards, given where the polls are right now, is that going to be the motivation that Starmer needs to change his mind on this? That one I'm going to push back to Alex Clark, please.
So during his campaign for the Labour leadership, Keir Starmer spoke about the fact that we need to do something about millions of people voting in places where they feel their vote doesn't count. There are quotes out there in his biography where it's acknowledged. Oh, I've got some feedback. Where it's acknowledged that the voting system has issues or is flawed and things like that. I think he grew up in a safe seat. May will present a challenge. It's looking like it's going to be a challenge for Labour at the polls the way they are. And hopefully that will present an opportunity for the party to reassess whether or not what it's doing is governing in line with its values of fairness and equality and democracy, which PR is a key part of. Our job is to make sure that we galvanise support across the Labour movement for whatever opportunities come, and making sure that that support is not just the membership, but the unions and the Parliamentary Labour Party. So that if there is a kind of realignment further down the year, a National Commission on Electoral Reform is a key part of Labour kind of readjusting how it faces out towards the country.
Yeah, thank you. So we've had another question from John Cartledge, who has asked, isn't Reform UK in favour of electoral reform too? If so, shouldn't it be part of your inter-party alliance to maximise the breadth of support? I'll take this one because it's kind of an MVM one talking about the alliance. And what I would say, John, is that Reform are part of the alliance. We have worked with Reform. We continue to work with Reform. We work with every party who, is in favour of PR or has MPs in favour of PR, and we work with parties who aren't in favour of PR. We're working with Conservative MPs and Conservatives in the Lords as well. So it is a cross-party campaign. We are non-partisan, and although a lot of tonight's call has focused on the Labour Party and has talked a lot about the Labour Party, with Labour being in power, that's where the focus needs to be, whilst talking about sort of moving things in line with the bill. But the all-party parliamentary group as well is cross-party. So I would just stress that we do have activists from all political backgrounds, and we are campaigning in every political area. So anyway, I shall move on to next question, which is Sean Hagan has given us a question about how is the APPG planning to coordinate a submission of the appropriate amendments to the Representation of the People Bill, and what would be the chances of success? Alex, I'm going to put this one back to Alex Clark. Alex Sobel, I'll give you a chance to come in on it as well if you want to, but I'll go back to Alex first of all, because I know this has been a lot of the work you've been doing in Westminster.
Yeah, when it comes to amendments, the all-party parliamentary group is not just a kind of nice sounding thing. Like, we are actively organising through it, and it's a really useful sorting house for not just PR amendments, but disinformation and dark money stuff as well. So there's a mix of amendments in the going into that bill, and some of them have already kind of been part of the bill committee stage. We are coordinating particularly Labour-led amendments, and we'll make sure that there's no kind of action that's cutting across each other during that. It's not. I can't really go into more details now, but yeah, there'll be more to share, and there'll particularly be ways for activists to get involved later down the line.
Alex Sobel, did you want to come in with your APPG hat on at all, or has Alex Zur-Clark covered it all?
I think Alex has covered it. We just need to be a bit careful tactically, because it is difficult. It's like carrying the proverbial Ming vase across a polished floor, getting amendments through with government and the way it operates and the politics of it. And so I think that the political background will change, and then it gives us an opportunity. I think that's all I'll say. But we are quietly and diligently working through lists of MPs and getting support and names. And I think everybody will be surprised at the outcome in terms of level of support that we have.
That's great to hear. I love the analogy of carrying a Ming vase across a polished floor. I might use that one at a later date. We've got a question from Alan Meekings, who is asking about the immediate implementation of ranked choice voting in constituencies as a step towards PR, and whether that's possible and whether it's a strategy that's worth considering. I'm going to go to Alex Sobel initially, but Alex Zur-Clark might want to come in with some thoughts after as well. Sorry, Alex Sobel, over to you.
All right, okay.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, I thought it was going to Alex. So what was the
No,
question?
I'm sorry. It was Alan Meekings has been asking about an immediate implementation of ranked choice voting.
So
in
AV basically, yeah. We already went
Yeah.
through. Yeah, I've got the scars as the deputy director of the Labour for AV campaign. Basically that puts us in Australia position. I'm not. I mean, I think at the time, it was like any change is good change, and so we've got to try to do this. But lots of people, even people who support, I'll give an example. John Grogan, who's a big supporter of PR, voted against it and supported the other side because in some cases it creates a less proportional result. And I think that although it retains the exact same constituency link, boundaries, and all the rest that we have now, it it it, it's if the Prime Minister said the only thing I'm going to offer is this, then we'd have to consider it. But it is far from ideal.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's really helpful. We've got a question from dear Linda. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. You've asked if parliamentary petitions have any impact, which is another question we hear quite frequently, actually. Alex Sobel, would you mind answering that one, please?
Gets us a 3-hour debate on a Monday. That's about all I'd say it does.
Well, that's we'll leave that to people's interpretations.
I would just also add it sends a very clear message to outside people, particularly if it's hundreds of thousands of people. It's very important.
It's really big. It's really big. Yeah, then yeah.
Thank you. That's helpful. So we have got another question from Sean Hagan, which is off the back of York Council having recently passed a motion calling for PR. And Sean's asked, is it useful in order to help build public pressure and momentum for change for Labour councils to pass motions calling for a national commission on electoral reform? Alex Sobel is nodding fiercely. Would you like to chip in?
It's really helpful because it shows it isn't just something that MPs are obsessed about or a certain portion of our membership. The general view is the most grounded people in politics are local councillors. And so if local councils vote for a change in the electoral system, that's great. I mean, come back to my earlier point. If a few local authorities volunteered themselves to have an experiment in their voting system, then that may be positive. But I don't think we could come from the top down. But if it came from the bottom up, then maybe that is something that's worth doing.
Yeah, that's not dissimilar to what happened in certain regions in Wales, is it not? I believe. Alex Clark, did you want to say anything more on that one?
No, I think it's great having local support. It really helps when we particularly try and get constituency Labour parties to give their MPs their backing. And yeah, as Alex said, it gets noticed by MPs who know all their local councillors and things like that. So it's worth doing.
Brilliant, thank you. Clive Page has said that his own Labour MP says she's against proportional representation because it increases the likelihood that the next government will be a coalition. Clive isn't sure that's true, but he'd like some thoughts on that. Alex, I'm going to come to both of you, but I'll go to Alex Sobel first.
I mean, we had two minority governments / coalitions under first past the post in the last 15 years, 16 years. So it's in a multi-party system, first past the post does not create stable government. It does occasionally, which is obviously what happened in 2024. If you look at the polling now, there is a chance that it will create a single party government and that party will be Reform. So I don't know, unless their MP, which seems unlikely, is Reform MP, because they've only got, well, they've got two women now, but seems unlikely. That's the outcome. But more than likely, the way that the fragmentation of the political system is going, unless that reverses and the historical trend is towards it, not away from it, then first past the post will create, what it will do is create two things. It will create minority, no party, well, I'll say no party getting majority. Whether that creates a coalition or not is up there, because first past the post isn't designed for that. And secondly, it will create a huge disproportionality, at least under PR, although it might not create a majority government. Although my example always is New Zealand's 25 years in ish to PR, and it's had two majority governments. So it does sometimes, depending on the system, create a majority government. But at least it creates a proportional result. So we could end up under first past the post with both disproportionality and minorities, and maybe an inability to form a government because under first past the post, it really, that there are no incentives. While under PR, at least you know when you're going in that it's likely to be the outturn, so you're preparing for it.
Yeah, that's a very useful point, isn't it? It's kind of how deals are done before and after, and yeah, coalition under first past the post is messy, isn't it? Alex, one of the other things that Clive asked was what he could say to convince his MP otherwise. I know you've asked who his MP is, but yeah, Alex, is there anything that you would say is a useful kind of persuasive argument for MPs who are worried about coalitions, other than, obviously what Alex has just said about how they work? And
Yeah, I think there's a few different ways into this. I think so. Make Votes Matter have done a pretty good report on coalitions and comparing stability under PR systems and under first past the post, called Strong and Stable, which I'm sure many here will be familiar with. So I would firstly talk to her about the outcomes that PR governments deliver and that coalitions deliver. Yes, it takes longer to form a coalition, but the governments that you get are a lot more stable. Ministers serve a lot longer in posts. Prime ministers serve longer in posts, which all means they can do their job better. You tend to have better, particularly if you're talking to kind of Labour MPs. It's good to talk about the social democratic outcomes that you get under PR systems, because if you've got a government that is representing a majority of people, they tend to have a built-in incentive to create policy that benefits a majority of people, which is why you get better healthcare and better education and a more functional state. And I think also for MPs who are often kind of wading through the culture of Westminster, talking about the cultural change that the PR system brings is also important, because it would get rid of some of the kind of macho boys culture kind of braying stuff that Westminster is known for by a lot of people, unfortunately, and hopefully kind of lead to a more consensus-based adult politics.
We should add that our MP on the call is very much consensus, adult-based politics and none of your braying nonsense. So just to be clear,
Quite
in
right.
case anyone was even slightly confused on that. We've got a few more questions. I'll take a couple more questions and then we'll start thinking about wrapping up. But we've got Mackenzie's come back as well to ask, what do you feel the root causes of low turnout are? How will Labour ensure young people will receive the civic and political education they need to have the knowledge to engage in civic leadership? This is one for you, Alex Sobel, please.
Well, I don't think we've got a fully formed plan for that. Really, it's got to be, it's got to be schools and colleges at the centre of it. Plus, we need to reanimate youth work. So those that that might not have civic education at home and political education at home get it through youth work. So and also get an alternative point of view, maybe depending on what the politics are at home. So I think that we're in the foothills of that, frankly, but that is something the government is thinking about. I think in terms of, I'll be honest, I'll repeat what I said. I think in terms of what schools do, I think we are sort of at an apex, historical apex of it, compared to what I experienced at school. I'm not sure about Alex because he's obviously younger than me, what he experienced at school. But obviously it could be a lot better. So I think, but I don't think that it should be a barrier to reform. That actually is something that our opponents say. Oh well, we've got to get everybody ready before we change anything because it's, the one of the other arguments about complexity. Oh, it's too complex. People won't understand it, right? Nobody. Well, no, people did say that when we changed the system in Scotland and Wales. Somehow, people in Scotland and Wales still managed to vote. I've never heard anybody on the doors of Scotland and Wales say, "I'm not voting in this election because the system is too complicated. I'm staying at home. I'm going to wait for Westminster because that's simpler and I know what I'm doing. I won't bother." Right. So, it is, and I don't think anybody's going to make an argument that somehow people in England are very different to people in Scotland and Wales. So, I think that we need to be a bit careful about these arguments as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex, did you have anything to add to that, Alex Zur-Clark? Sorry, it's confusing having two Alexes, isn't it?
Sorry.
No, you can't help your name.
Was that around civic education?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the work that Make Votes Matter are doing with the young people has been really transformative. It's really good to see more young people getting involved in this campaign. And I know that there are other kind of youth engagement campaigns out there like Give an X and My Life, My Say and the Patchwork Foundation. And I'm sure there's some kind of overlap and partnerships that are possible. We sometimes have those groups turn up to events that we do in Parliament and things like that. I think the kind of thing that this representation of the people bill needs to grapple with is it doesn't really do what it says on the tin. And when you're giving votes to 16-year-olds, they need to be confident that that is going to actually matter. Otherwise, they'll just become kind of disillusioned with voting.
Yeah, thank you. We've got a question about electoral reform being tied in with regional devolution, and how regional devolution is quite a large part of Labour's current constitutional reform agenda. Alex Sobel, do you have any thoughts on that one?
I think we need to be a bit careful because regional devolution is patchwork still. It's not, I'm a federalist. I think we should have a federal system, which is not what's happened. And so you're effectively just creating a barrier by the people can say, oh, well, okay, yes, fine, we'll link it. Once devolution is complete, then we'll consider changing Westminster voting system. So thanks, in 15 to 20 years, we can consider it. I think that, we just give it, let's be careful not to give our opponents ammunition. But if there is a bit of an argument, say, look at the success of elected mayors. I'm sitting in West Yorkshire. Our elected mayor is Tracy Braben, the first female mayor, combined authority mayor in the country. And it does create a different atmosphere. But I think it's difficult to link it to the voting system directly and making that political argument. It's it's a bit of, we're trying to fit a square shape into a round hole effectively. So I think it's important, and the fact that we're going back to having having at least supplementary vote is good. But that again, that's not a proportional system or anything, and you're electing one mayor each. So I don't think that we should. I mean, how could you? Because it's just one candidate and one area, one area. So I think that we need to be a bit careful about that. But I think in linking it to reform agenda, that's useful in broad terms.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm going to close with one more question, which is from Graham Cook. And Graham said, given that it's extremely desirable to have proportional representation in place within the next 3 years and before the next general election, and that PR is supported by a majority of the public, many trade unions and the CBI, and many other organisations, should we not be ramping up the campaign by organising a mass protest or a day of action supported by those organisations along the same lines that the protests that were held by the suffragette movement and suffragist movement? I must mention the suffragists as well. And we want something along the lines of a massive rally held in London against the war in Iraq, whether we should be doing something like that. That's a really good question, Graham. I think from an MVM grassroots kind of perspective, we have got some things lined up. We have got. We'll give you a bit more information in due course. I won't go into it in massive detail on this call because again, otherwise we'd be here for longer than we all have. But we do have something planned around May elections. We do have something planned Westminster and up and down the country. And yeah, I mean, the grassroots activism, we've got, I mean, Graham actually, who's asked the question, is in Chester and has set up a local group in Chester. We've got local groups up and down the country that are doing loads of amazing stuff. So I think, we keep doing the grassroots work. We keep drumming up this small M momentum and we keep pushing and we keep making PR a conversation that people want to have and that people are interested in. I mean, I'm sure that anybody on the call who's been involved in the democracy sector for any number of years is seeing that there has been a shift in conversation. You sort of, your conversations that you're having, your everyday conversations, PR, you used to have to explain PR and electoral reform to people. Now, if you mention it, people do know exactly what you're talking about. And it is that kind of activism push. It's the fact that it is in the press. It's the fact that it is being spoken about in places where it needs to be spoken about. So I think, there is work to be done. There's definitely work to be done, and we've all got work to do on this. But I think, we're starting to see, this kind of shift, and we need to just keep pushing at that. I don't know if Alex Sobel, you've got any final thoughts, anything that you'd like to add to the meeting before we.
I think I'm just in the chat, so sorry. So I think having a lobby of Parliament is a really good idea, and engaging with MPs who might not be on board. I mean, the thing that wasn't really said, everybody here is very alive to the issue. And you might be surprised to hear this, but there's a lot of MPs, particularly Labour MPs, who just aren't interested. This is not really something that bothers them. They are agnostic, completely agnostic to it. So when you say, why aren't there more Labour MPs supporting, or why aren't there more Labour MPs opposing? That the numbers don't stack up to 403 now Labour MPs because loads of them just don't care, quite frankly, right? So that's probably the big number. I think we actually have more MPs that are in favour than don't care, but the don't cares definitely beat the opponents, by a significant margin. So having a mass lobby, particularly if you go and see an MP that doesn't care, that's great. I honestly don't think anybody that's completely opposed to it is going to change their mind. If they care and they're against it, that's going to be their position, right? But the agnostic ones, that's a completely different kettle of fish.
Brilliant, thank you. Alex, did you have anything to add to that, Alex Zur-Clark?
I think that's really accurate, actually. The other thing that I'd say about kind of mass mobilizations is that they are really challenging to pull off. And what tends to motivate people to come out and start marching on the streets is a combination of factors and something quite emotional. There was a huge march in London over the weekend against the far right. And I think that if PR is going to become that sort of movement, then it's going to be through partnerships beyond the organisations that are kind of the tip of the spear on this. But I mean, it bears thinking about. But there's a kind of opportunity cost in terms of what campaigns focus on.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Just before we finish up, I just wanted to give you, we talked a little bit about, and this kind of leads into the kind of mass mobilization and campaigning. We will be doing stuff around the May elections. Do keep an eye on your emails. I mean, there's some really important things that we need to think about and remember. That we've got 5 parties polling in the May elections, and the outcomes are so unpredictable. And the chances are it is going to generate a situation where we're going to see some like results that are going to be shocking in every direction. And it's just too unpredictable to call as to what's going to happen. I mean, this is what happens when you have a multi-party system in a multi-party political setup in a 2-party system. It's messy. Our job is going to be to use the election. Our job as activists and campaigners is going to be to use the election to point to what might happen in the next general election if we don't achieve PR. We need to be we really need to be on it. We're going to be coordinating an action. We're going to be coordinating as much coverage of local press and national press, and this is going to be driven by our activists. So if you are a writer, if you are someone who can write to your local press, start thinking about how you can allocate that time now. Start thinking about things that you could be writing. Keep an eye on your emails. We're going to be asking activists to get involved. There's going to be loads to do around May. I do understand that a lot of you might be campaigning, and we do understand that. So, if you can, post campaigning, if you can sort of drag yourself up from the sofa, then great, there'll be work to do. If you can't drag yourself up from the sofa post campaigning, which we do understand, then there'll be, emailing and writing to be done. So do just watch your emails, keep an eye out, and we'll definitely be in touch. Thank you once again to Alex Sobel and Alex Zur-Clark for joining us. You've been super helpful. It's been really great to hear from both of you. I'm sure everybody feels much more up to speed with what's going on in Westminster and what's going on with the APPG. Thank you for all your awesome work on that. And thank you to all of our activists for all your great work. And we'll be in touch very soon. Keep an eye on those emails. Thanks all for joining us. Take care. Enjoy the rest of the evening.